going to talk about underground bases. So I yield the floor to our resident expert, Mr. James.
Oh, by the way,
I'm not exactly sure, but we might be close to the 5-year anniversary. I guess that's something I should know, right? What day it exactly is, but
Really? 5 years?
Yeah.
For your program?
for this podcast, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
close.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Just stick with things.
All I know is I wasn't the first guest. So
You weren't the first guest because you couldn't get your drunk ass off the couch. You're supposed to be.
I wasn't home or some shit.
No, you were home. You just couldn't.
Really?
You had a rough
Probably
night.
couldn't get
Yeah,
out
you had a
the
rough
door.
night. So I had Susie Cool was my first guest on here. Yes, correct.
Let's
so
see,
much
4
material.
years ago. It doesn't say what date. Yeah, because we had to make it. We had to make it 2-part series.
So is your longest running sub-series your Four Friends series?
As a sub series, I
Yeah.
guess, but that's a rotating cast.
Okay.
So it's this show.
Whoa.
And our squad show, which is a little bit behind this show. This show first, and then
How many episodes are you up to now?
360 something.
So exciting.
Wow.
I should know that too. I don't. 368 maybe.
Wow.
This might be 368. Yeah, I slowed the last couple of months. I'm not cranking out as many as I typically do, but
Yeah.
that will change here shortly. So.
We're waiting for the AI one to come
So
out.
Oh yeah.
my episode,
soon.
my episode
Anxiously
3
anticipating.
was April 9th of 2019.
Okay, so that was it. That's episode 3. So I'm guessing maybe just toward the end of March was the 5th year. I will figure that out and post that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Not bad.
Nice.
For a hobby.
Congrats.
I'll say.
Thank you. Nice.
So Eric has invited me tonight to talk about DUMS. Fred, can you tell everybody what's DUMS stand for? Give us an overview.
Fred stands for Fred.
Deep Underground Military Base Sucker. That's what it is. Yeah, Deep Underground Military Bases, or DUMS. And we've got a lot of them.
We do.
There's an
Excited
awful
about
lot
Well,
of them.
do we have a lot of them legitimately or conspiratorially?
Legitimately. They got
I would
enough
say
of them.
so. It's not necessarily a secret anymore. You can go on Instagram right now without too much searching. You can find videos of truck drivers that are taking it when they're driving through these things, and the scope of these is absolutely massive. Like to just think driving a big rig 45 miles underground through a massive, or 45 miles per hour underground through a massive cavern. They're a huge amount. Later in the presentation, I will show some maps that have surfaced ever since the 1980s and have never been refuted. And even then, there was what appears to be a massive honeycomb network all across the United States and beyond.
They have tunnels that connect them.
Yeah, so there was always a rumor that I guess out of LA there was tunnels from Los Angeles that would go into Arizona. And,
Oh, it's funny you say that because I didn't get a chance to update this presentation. It was a crazy week. But one thing I wanted to add is in the early 1900s, you can still see the newspaper clippings. There were a lot of articles about underneath Los Angeles, not only were there caverns, but they were inhabited by lizard people. And it was reported a lot of different places, and it was fairly accepted knowledge at the time. And then over the last couple of decades, that's disappeared. So, yeah, definitely LA.
They would come out of little sewer things like the clown in It. That's serious. That's where they the reptilians.
We're off to the races.
Oh, see, all folklore comes from somewhere, huh?
Well, it's funny too because I don't have many dedicated slides to the reptilians, but if you want to go with that extraterrestrial angle, or some argue that they were the original Terrans and then we came about later, but Fred, wouldn't you say that the reptilian conspiracy is unique because out of all the different races mentioned that allegedly visit here, those are the ones that don't come from outer space, but they come up from under the ground.
They live subterranean. So when you hear about these bases, you get a lot of reptilian mentions there.
Absolutely.
Well, and they have those video overlays where every politician, all these different famous people have the they'll catch them in different angles, and then they're like, oh, there's their scales.
Oh yeah. Like their eyes shift or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, we could do a totally separate podcast. Shapeshifters, Black Eye Club. I mean, that's terrifying stuff. Yeah, absolutely it is.
Okay.
Episode 14.
And we're off.
So let's start off with a history of underground bases, and I can make this pretty exciting. We can get through it pretty quickly. So a lot of people, when they hear the idea, if they start to accept it, they assume that it's a more modern conspiracy or a more modern convention, but it's really not. This dates back to ancient times. What you see here is a photograph of one of the largest underground cities of antiquity. This is Derinkuyu, Turkey. And just to give you some idea, this is going back 8th century BC. So we're going back basically almost 3,000 years. Look at the amazing engineering. It's sunk 18 stories underground, carved by hand into volcanic rock. They estimate it could accommodate up to 20,000 people. So ventilation shafts, wells, kitchens, you can read the list there. And then each level could be sealed off in the event of an attack. And so here is part of Derinkuyu that's actually excavated here, which is very, very impressive. One of the things that's always perplexing to me, though, is this. What exactly were these people hiding from? And people don't really think about that part when we talk deep underground military bases. But there's a saying in the military, a cave is a grave. So essentially, if you go into a cave, you're much more vulnerable to your enemy then, because your enemy can basically just wait at the openings, they can seal off the openings, they can cut off your air. So people don't really think about this part, but if they're going that far underground, some people have started to suggest maybe it wasn't another human adversary. Maybe it was something much, much more. Maybe it was something from up in the sky that they had to get down so deep to actually hide from it. So pretty fascinating. Here's a side view schematic of Derinkuyu.
That's incredible.
Wow. Here's the other thing that's amazing to me is, you know, a lot of times we'll talk about like the Egyptian pyramids, we talk about the ancient aliens hypothesis, and I'm super, super into that. I'm not going to deny that. But when you look at this one is clearly just carved by human hands. And so back in the 8th century BC, to be able to go 18 stories down underground, to be able to build a facility then that could accommodate 20,000 people, not only is that amazingly impressive, but just think, what could we do today if they could do that back then?
Well, you gotta wonder how many people died doing that.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I know
insane.
it's morbid, but like still, like I mean, if they were like literally hand carving that stuff, like if it wasn't structurally sound yet,
right. You could have cave it. I mean, just
that
look how many people
creeps me
died
out.
in coal mines.
That's what I'm saying. That's like the first thing that I thought about. Yeah.
Absolutely insane. So probably a lot of people recognize Petra from the final scene of Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, but this is also incredibly impressive. So in the movie, they show the exterior, but the interior is vastly different. Once again, hand-carved rooms could accommodate up to 20,000 people, and it was rediscovered in the 1800s. The crazy thing, they are still excavating Petra, so there could be even more that's actually under there. Okay, this one totally blows my mind. Nobody has any idea how these things are actually built. These are the Long Yao caves in China. They think they date back to 200 BC. Now, just a real quick aside for any of your listeners on dating. I'm sure almost everybody has heard of carbon dating, and people think that carbon dating can do almost anything. So carbon dating is basically you measure the ratio of one type of carbon versus another type, because carbon is radioactive, like it decays over time, and that gives you an age. The problem is carbon dating only works for things that were actually once alive, that had carbon in them. So what you see here in a lot of these ancient sites, you cannot carbon date rock. So the best thing that they can do is essentially look at what is left there with the rock and try to date it. But here's the problem. Let's say somebody rediscovered this in ancient times, maybe 500 years ago, and they accidentally left some garbage in the cave. A modern day archaeologist sees that from 500 years ago, and they're like, oh, this must date to 500 years ago, but it could date back much, much farther. So just a quick aside, anytime you see anything that's pure rock like this, it's just conjecture. So this is dubbed, I'm going to show you pictures, they're insane, the ninth wonder of the ancient world. They are 24 enormous hand-carved caves. Each of them averages 1,000 square meters, which is unreal. So they've got these support columns, and one of the amazing things about the Long Yao caves, they have all these grooves on the side walls, and nobody's quite sure why there are those grooves there. And you can see a lot of Chinese carvings inside. So it's not necessarily an ancient aliens angle, but it is basically how in the world did they do this? And once again, what were they hiding from? And what's amazing about the Long Yao Caves is it's not that they took a massive cave system and just made it a little bit bigger. These are basically carved right out of the ground. And so once again, people don't know how they actually did it. So before we jump up to the World War II era, anybody have anything to add about these ancient cities?
Well, that city, if I remember reading correctly, has not been fully excavated yet, right? There could be many more layers to it, or
Long Yao?
levels. Yes. No, the prior.
Oh, to Petra.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, to Darren Kuyu.
Darren Kuyu.
Oh yeah,
yes.
absolutely. They're still digging down there.
Yeah, I mean, who knows how big that is? It's mind-numbing.
And two, you have to look at some of the countries that they are in. So number one, like I know a lot about archaeology just on the side. Not only is excavation very meticulous, but in countries like Turkey, you might not have the access to technology that we have here for excavation. So a lot of this is just being done with pickaxes by hand. So yeah, there could be quite a lot more there. Insane.
And some of the rooms in there, I think, too, are big enough for, you said, for cattle, and they get that's unbelievable. Like how did they understand ventilation at that point? Because there has to be multiple ventilation points, right?
Right. And you have to ask yourself too, what were they so fearful of that they were willing to take their cattle and everything? Because these things are built for a very, very long term.
It isn't like
stay.
they just woke up one day and say, "Hey, let's build some tunnels."
Right?
Do you think they were like thinking there was going to be some like catastrophic event or something like that?
It could
Like
have been a flood, right? Because they would be flooded out.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, and that's kind of I don't know that it would be helpful, like, or like like a weather event or something. I don't know.
No.
And then plus two, you have to realize back then almost all tradition is just oral tradition.
Yeah.
And so they are only really getting stories from like 2 generations before them tops.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So would they have really had the knowledge like, hey, every now and then there's a catastrophic event? And as you alluded to, Julia, like how many catastrophic events would it actually be worse for to be way down underground?
Exactly. Yeah, so
flood,
I'm just
mudslide,
like
volcano.
spitballing. I'm like, what else would you be hiding from other than, like you said, like maybe like some kind of
some kind of space alien coming to enslave us. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it, I mean, this is actually pretty close to Göbekli Tepe, right?
And that you want to talk about another site that has not been excavated.
But it was buried and hidden just like this site. It was hidden. This site was they found this. The guy was renovating his house, right? When he tapped into it. And
what happened? Where's that?
This guy was fixing his house up. He's like doing renovations. He wanted to expand the room, and he knocked down a wall in his house, and he found this. He found a whole network catacomb of caves, and it was this place. It was like literally they built right on top of it, but he smashed into the stone, and he wanted to add to it, and I guess it's a bigger room, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
18 stories of. I would have said anything. I'd have been like, you know what?
I'm just going to use this as my infrastructure.
Yeah, he's got a cool pad there now. But yeah, I mean, these cats were hiding from something on the surface, and they buried, Göbekli Tepe. You've got all these old catacombs.
It just doesn't make any sense.
They're hiding from something.
Yeah, I mean, you just wouldn't put the effort in to do something so drastic like that unless there was motivated by survival.
Yeah, that's what I mean, because I feel like people would be like dying making this.
What did they date this back to? So it's not back to the Younger Dryas, right? It's not back.
Darren Kuyu?
Yeah.
Listen to you, Younger Dryas.
Come on.
I just like dropping that.
He's
drop names. I work for Motley Crue too. I don't know if you guys know that.
So this one is 8th century BC, but I'm glad you brought up Göbekli Tepe. I think
because that's 12,000.
Yeah. So the amazing thing. So Fred referenced trying to spell it.
Oh, geez.
Göbekli Tepe.
Because I've got a presentation on that one too. So Göbekli Tepe is in Turkey, and it's of course I spelled it wrong. Okay, I'm not even going to try to find it right now. So what's amazing about it is prior to Göbekli Tepe, they thought that the oldest form of civilization, when we say civilization, means cities and agriculture, went back at most to 4,500 BC or so. Göbekli Tepe goes back maybe to 10,000 BC, which is insane. And not only have they only excavated 10% of it, but as Fred mentioned, the really weird thing, they could tell by how the sediment was that whoever built it quickly buried it. And that part's really, really wild. So why would you go to all the trouble to build it? And then why would you try to hide it from somebody else, which is pretty crazy.
Which could lead into this, the caverns there. Again, find a piece of garbage. Oh, look, it's only 800 BC. It could be much older.
Well, how? Okay, so if they were living down there for periods of time, like, what about like plumbing and sanitation?
That place was like decked out. They had everything. They had air shafts.
Yeah.
They had clean air. They had.
How did you remove the poop?
Well, they had water. Well, you probably had to take a pooper scooper and throw it out. But look, if you're digging a hole that big, I mean, sure they probably
I don't
had.
know, man.
So wait, was there evidence that people did live in these?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
okay.
that's a really good question. So yes, but at the same time, it also seemed like these were there in the event of an emergency,
just in
and
case
they were
kind
not
of
down there for a
situation.
really long period of time.
Okay.
Yeah, you would get rickets and scurvy living underground for a period of time, right? With
You would
no
think so.
sunlight.
But they had food sources. They had storage. It was like they're like the preppers of. But the thing is, again, their seal off systems were giant stones that you just go like this and it rolled into place. One person could do a 2-ton block.
Maybe it was dragons. Maybe that's what they were trying to run from.
Yeah, maybe it was. Maybe it was dragons.
What's funny in the pre-show, like for anybody who watches the show for a long time, you know that Fred refers to people as cats.
Which has really been screwing me up today because
Yeah.
we haven't seen each
Julia
other for
took
a
it
while.
Literally, like, what were these ancient cats doing? All right, so let's take a big jump ahead now to World War II. So the Nazis were also working with underground bases. So this is called Project Reese. This is 1943. So this was a series of 7 massive underground bases in the Owl Mountains of Poland, which at the time was German territory. And so the Germans were digging down underground for protection from Allied air raids. And I want to throw it out there for a parallel because isn't it interesting? The Nazis instinctively went down underground due to a nemesis from the sky. So looking back to Darren Kuyu, is there a chance that that was happening back then as well? Whether it was dragons, whether it was a more advanced civilization, something from the sky. Now, what was totally brutal about these is they were going into gneiss rock, which is not nice at all. It's a terrible geology joke, but it's this very, very hard metamorphic rock. And so this, definitely not ancient aliens, nothing advanced. The Nazis were just using POWs and concentration camp labor. But just to show you some pictures of what was actually under there, they had massive caverns, and then terrifying, they had machine gun turrets behind big concrete block walls. So if the Allies ever got down in there and tried to clear it, they would have suffered heavy losses. And a number of these bases are now actually tourist sites there. And the crazy thing is they were basically abandoned by the Nazis. So all of the firearms you see there are not reproductions. Those are just World War II firearms that were actually left under the ground there. So it wasn't just the Germans tunneling underground, but the Chinese and the British were doing this too. So during this time, these were continuity of government facilities. Anybody heard of can anybody describe continuity of government there? It's dark.
Well,
It's
yeah.
like that-
Don't we have that in West Virginia somewhere?
Greenbrier. Yeah, it's Greenbrier.
Well, that's the what was that movie or the series that had oh my gosh, it was like the it's like when they take a person from it's like one person that they keep out of the whatever if they're having everybody from
they do
Congress.
that now, yeah.
That's what I mean. It's what is the name of it? There's a name of it, and that was the name of the show. It was such a good show. It'll come to me later.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I know. I sound so excited. I'm not telling you anything about it.
Speaking of that, they don't keep the vice president and the president separate, on a State of the Union. Wouldn't it make more sense that the vice president shouldn't be there? Think about that for a second.
Yeah,
right?
because the person that they assign
He's
in that
way down
role
the
is usually
ladder.
just some random
Secretary of
dude.
Interior or
And
some
that's what
shit.
happened is that
Yeah.
basically there was this
Some useless cabinet
level
position.
of event that the entire government got taken out.
Is it Designated Survivor?
That's it.
Yes.
Yes, it was so good. Oh, it was such a good show. Did you watch it? Did you watch it?
No, but it's also designated survivor is basically somebody that they intentionally keep away from all of the top people. So if something goes wrong,
so shouldn't it be the vice president instead of?
That's the whole show is based on this guy that like literally was like nobody in the government.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Kiefer Sutherland. That's who that. Oh my God, it was such a good show. Okay, sorry.
Like, no, that's really one day. Good. Next thing he was running the free world.
Yeah, like literally, and he was just kind of like some dude that was like somewhere in government, but had no designs on ever being the president. And then
I'm in charge now.
Yeah.
But
that's continuity in government, basically. That they're trying to like, if there was like a cataclysmic event, that they could continue the government.
Do you think there's tunnels? Let me ask this question, a little sidebar. Do you believe there are tunnels from Washington D.C. to Greenbrier?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
They say no. What do you think there is?
Okay, so I'll give you my extreme take on that.
We'd expect nothing less.
Yes.
I do not think all the times that they say the president is on Air Force One, that he is actually on Air Force One.
Right.
Because obviously every time Air Force One flies, he's got a fighter escort. But there's still a lot more vulnerability being way up in the air. I have read that deep beneath the White House, there are actually tunnels where there are these high-speed maglev trains. My personal guess is the president, whenever he can, is probably transported underground via that system. Air Force One still flies without the president on it. Then it lands and the president comes up out of the ground as close as he can get to that spot.
Out of the Denver airport.
Interesting.
Which we're going to talk about.
Well, again, this is what's nuts about this. When you think about the system of tunnels and the conspiracy of all the government has all these tunnels from connecting all these cities, I want to believe it, but the sheer scope of construction to do something like that, it isn't happening in like 3 months. It's like years,
decades,
and then you have to take this. You have to take the instruments underground, and you have to carry displace the dirt somewhere.
You don't, and we'll talk about exactly why. This is no Shawshank.
I love this.
Are they melting the dirt, or what are they doing?
This is no Shawshank.
Yes.
You should quote that for the show. That should be the tagline.
This is no Shawshank.
This ain't no Shawshank.
Do you guys remember for a period of like 15 years, whenever you turn on the TV, if you went far enough, you would find Shawshank?
You find it everywhere.
I'm aware of it.
Andy Dufresne.
Great movie, but it just got beat to death.
It got comforting though.
I watched it the other day.
Did you really?
I watched it. Yeah, I watched it the other day. And I went to. We played that Incarceration Fest. That's when I started with Limp Bizkit. That's where we played. We played that prison.
Way.
Yeah,
It's cool, we went there a couple years ago. It was good.
And you can go on the prison tour. You know.
Wait a second. You know, another movie was just like that, overdone and constantly played in every aspect of
Rockstar.
No, we wish. Although, maybe
I only got 37 cents more.
Is that movie something Mile?
Green Mile.
Green
The Green Mile. That was. I think the Shawshank Redemption usurped the Green Mile.
Aren't they both Stephen King books? Both of them.
Yep.
Yeah, I believe they are.
Yes,
You
they
know,
are.
Fascinating thing about the Green Mile wasn't the book a much younger person, but then they cast an older person for it because they thought a younger person would be too controversial. I could be wrong.
I cannot remember that.
I can't even remember the premise of the movie, but I remember it was always on.
Walking the Green Mile. Walking the Green Mile.
Yeah.
That's such a good movie.
Yeah, I would get frustrated when Shawshank was always on, but then I got a point that it wasn't on anymore, and I just felt like...
Now there's like something missing in my life.
My Saturday's ruined.
I have movies like that I could just keep watching.
So I like to throw this slide in there because it makes me think a little bit. If you want to read one book of the Old Testament that's pretty trippy, pretty awesome, and it sort of has a lot of parallels to our present and our future, I would definitely go with the book of Isaiah. So, actual quote, "And they shall go into the holes of the rocks and into the caves of the earth for fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth." So some people, when they look at things like this and they see how much we're starting to go underground, they really believe it's more apocalyptic, that this is one of the signs of end times. People are starting to go underground to try to get away from this, but it's not actually going to work. So I just wanted to throw this in there because, again, the idea of people going underground is not a modern conspiracy. This has been around for quite some time. Okay.
Maybe they were getting away from the balloons.
What?
Maybe
Weather balloons?
like just random balloons.
Just random balloons. Do you know
the balloons. Did you see another balloon? Another mysterious balloon?
Oh, you know, really? Spy balloons.
Well, whatever they are.
How about that spy balloon? Wasn't that a weird?
There's another one
sequence?
that just go on the news tonight. You'll see it. It's over. It's going to be heading toward Georgia here shortly.
So, do you know there are people that have a fear of balloons, just like regular balloons?
It's the same thing as a fear of clowns.
That's actually a phobia.
Like he's got a balloon animal. He's like blowing it up. He's like somebody's freaked out. It's like clowns and balloons.
And there are people really don't like the sound of balloons rubbing together. That's like
I love to find those people because I just.
What was that sound again, Fred?
And we're off.
It makes her hair stand up and it's like all sticking up.
Was that a girlfriend or your ex-wife? Which time was that?
That was a balloon.
Wasn't that whole spy balloon sequence just odd? Like first they identified.
It just went away. They never told us what it was.
Well, it was so weird. Like first they identify it as spy balloons. They're like, yeah, we're too scared to shoot it down, so we're just gonna let it go the whole way across our country.
And then we'll shoot it down.
And then once it goes across the country, then Biden gives the order to shoot it down. But then here's the super weird part, like not to talk politics. After that happened, then even more spy balloons from China got spotted over the U.S. and Canada, and then at least one or two U.S. defense officials tried to say, we don't know what they are. There's a chance they're not even from the Earth. And then I'm like,
I remember.
Whoa. Yeah. Like, what is it that you're trying to cover so badly that you're willing to insinuate extraterrestrials just to try to cover this thing up? It was just a really bizarre sequence, because on one hand, you're like, are the Chinese really that far behind technology-wise that they are still in 2023 using balloons to fly over our country? But then the other weird part is you're like, why did they take that story that people were frustrated about but still believe and suddenly interject extraterrestrials? Like, is this a Project Bluebeam? Are they trying to get us ready for that? It was just a really weird sequence.
Didn't they finally say it's like some high school weather meteorology club, they shot down their balloon in Canada, something like that.
Really?
That was the cover story for one of them.
But you know what's unsettling is, like, we have all this technology, all right? Yeah. We think that our government can do anything with technology, but yet they're not aware of this thing floating in our atmosphere for a period of time. Like, I thought they had every scintilla of our atmosphere covered. They don't. And what does that say? That's scary, dude. Think about it.
I think they were aware of it. They weren't going to say anything until somebody saw it.
And then if you want to go into a darker conspiracy, like, and not to go too deep in this, but like when you look at the wave of like migration happening to this country, like a lot of these people are coming from China.
Military age men.
Yeah, and that's super scary.
And they're buying all the farmland near military bases.
Red Dawn right there.
Yeah.
That's how they did it.
Phil was just talking about this on Rogan last week.
They all got in Red Dawn. They infiltrated.
And who would have ever thought Dr. Phil would be the person telling us these things?
Yeah, that was a good show with Rogan.
I didn't finish it, but I just saw a few clips.
Yeah, that was a good show.
But so then when you look at what's happening now, you're like, okay, was it really a Chinese spy balloon, and they just intentionally let it drift across the country to get that intel?
Do you trust anything anymore?
No, nothing.
No,
not a thing.
I trust this right here. This is good. Okay, anything beyond this.
Okay, so another little sidebar, because this seems to be a pretty relevant topic here on the Eric McKenna Project recently. I would love to hear both. I kind of get Julia's vibe, but she's articulated this to me. But I'd like to get both of your vibes on it. Are we reaching that dangerous point, wherever that is and whenever it is, where our reality completely is non-trustable for the average person? Meaning, like, even conversations, things they see and the visions they see as they're driving down the road, if they start questioning everything, it sounds a little far-fetched, but we're getting to the point, I believe, that maybe so much is being disproven or putting question marks on everything that we're not going to be able to believe anything anymore.
There was an alien at the mall in Miami. There was an alien in somebody's backyard in Las Vegas. And they just put it on the mainstream now. It's like, that was there. Hey, check it out. I called the cops. And no, it's really there. So the thing is again, it's Project Bluebeam.
Well, isn't there like something like by 2027 there's like full disclosure planned or something like that?
Yeah. What does that mean?
I always push that back. Yeah.
I keep hearing about like
but
that's
that's
like a
the
thing.
danger, I think, of AI, and that's where we talked about it
that's
recently. Is like
right there.
It's not start. AI is going to get so good at replicating what we expect to see in reality that the blur is going to be there, and then and again, this is naturally everything comes down to politics, but like I really fear that we're not going to trust our starting with this next big election and every election afterwards of any level. We're just not going to believe the results anymore. If our people win, oh, fantastic. If our people lose, it was definitely something was not on the up and up, and we just don't have any kind of like I don't know. It's not brevity is the word I'm looking for. It's just I don't know if we just have enough. he's pushing whiskey on him. I just don't know if we have enough intellectual maturity. How about that to see and react to reality in an appropriate way which benefits us and the rest of our society. That's what I'm afraid of.
And that is a well-founded fear. The phrase I saw that really hit me hard was, we are entering a post-truth world, which made quite a lot of sense to me. The internet in so many ways has been amazing, but there is so much overload. There are so many perspectives from so many different angles. You have United States intelligence agencies and the media intentionally not only bombarding people with incorrect information, but intentionally bombarding them with so many conflicting stories that they can't even really differentiate what's real or what's not. Then you want to throw AI into it. And one interesting thing about AI, I don't know if you guys remember this, but maybe 2-3 years ago, before AI even exploded like it did, suddenly the media started to cover deep fakes. If you heard everything is a deep fake, they said, be careful of deep fakes because things that you see aren't really what they're going to be. Now, here's my personal belief. I think that they were afraid that some incriminating video was going to leak from some very powerful people, whether it was politicians, whether it was actors, what have you, whether it was child sex trafficking, whether it was some type of Epstein satanic ritual. And so that was basically their cover.
Preemptive strike.
Preemptive strike.
Britney Spears dancing with knives. That was the big thing.
And then it didn't end up happening. And then all of a sudden, over the past 3-4 months, there's been this explosion in AI.
Yes.
And so you're seeing all these very, very realistic videos. And it has a lot of implications, like even some you wouldn't expect. Like I saw, this is a real danger to the motion picture industry because AI can do this so realistically. But the other danger, the real danger is, once a lot of these powerful people, whether it's politicians, actors, musicians, once they're actually unmasked and video of their heinous crimes is put out there, now they have a built-in excuse. That didn't really happen. It's AI. And one of the scary things is, on one hand, it's really, really good that people question things. If you look at the progress of scientific history, anytime that human beings have not been allowed to question things, like during the Dark Ages, during the peak of the Catholic Church's Inquisition, scientific progress really slowed down.
Certainly.
But now it's almost like at the extreme other end, everybody is questioning everything.
That's my fear.
So there's no longer any type of solid foundation, and that's pretty wild.
Yeah, but there's still this like inability to question like the prescribed narrative.
Yes.
Because there are conversations that like, if you engage in them, like for example, like questioning different things about COVID and all that stuff, you know what I mean? Just like the basics. If you have discourse about different things that don't like toe the exact line of the narrative that, you know, is kind of just like pushed again and again and again, then, I mean, you can have the conversations, but you're going to be labeled in a particular way.
I think the problem is that we are, as a species, apparently so desperate for identity, and I can't understand why we are, but we are so desperate for identity, and naturally, you find your identity on what you say you believe, and if your beliefs are always in question, you're going to guess on a lot of stuff, or you're going to pick someone else's belief structure to grab onto. And I that's where I went side with this, James. I just wanted to know, like, do you think that because we're so desperate for certainty, I mean real certainty, because we just don't feel like there is any anymore, and we're so desperate for identity, do you feel that we just become more and more manipulable as the technology goes, and at some point in time we just may emotionally give up because we can't tell right from wrong, left from right, truth from non-truth. The definition of truth might not even be definable at some point.
Yes, and that actually echoes a quote from a former head of the CIA, I think it was William Casey, where he basically said, we will know our program is complete and successful when everything that the American public believes is false. And so that doesn't mean there aren't good people at the CIA. There are very good people, very brilliant people, but one of the goals of intelligence agencies is to basically confuse and to muddle. And one thing that's fascinating me is the arms race online. So it used to be in the earlier days of the internet, if something incriminating was put out there, it could get taken down pretty quickly. Now the problem is everybody backs up everything. Everybody shares things so rapidly.
Screenshots, man.
Yes, absolutely.
Change the game.
So I feel like intelligence agencies, the strategy is, look, we know we're not going to be able to get it down. We can't eliminate it. So the best that we can do is just flood the internet with so many different perspectives, so many conflicting viewpoints they can't do anything about. My personal belief is intelligence agencies employ a number of people whose only job is to be on social media, to be on message boards, and as soon as something very, very secure, confidential, damning is posted, right in the top comments, they're like, no, this is totally fake, this is this. Because how many things do you see online that are very eye-opening and very upsetting, and then as soon as you start to go through the comments, very first couple comments, no, fake, didn't actually happen. And for a lot of people, especially if they're watching something that's very, very upsetting to them and to their belief system, they will go to the comments section just for some reinforcement that what they're seeing is not real. And so then as soon as they see that first comment, like, okay, my worldview is still correct, they back out of it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that goes on.
This is on a very small scale, of course, but I definitely know for a fact that everything that we post online is being systematically curated and approved or non-approved. Okay, I've tested this now so many times. I know, roughly speaking, when I put something on the web, I can guarantee, I have a certain amount of engagement that I will see for posts. Some things are a little higher than others, but I could have 3 days of really good engagement and a lot of interaction and so forth. And then I will intentionally put something that reads this. It'll say, Donald sure was funny the other day when he did this. So just one sentence. It'll go a day or two with absolutely no engagement. The next day I'll say something about Joseph really screwed up this one or something. Not Biden, no leaning, no party, just like one sentence. Joseph really did this. Nothing. Today I did it again. I tested it again today. I said something about oh God, what was it about? I think I made a reference, and I just used the first name, like Don. Right. Don something or other, and it wasn't even a real leading sentence that would like point you right to that, but they are looking for the word Don, Donald, Joe, Giuseppe, anything that is in that is being flagged and not shared. It's unfucking believable. I mean, I am a nobody. I mean, this is happening to one little infinitesimal part of the web, me. But but the next post I put up there about anything, dogs, my guitar, right back to my normal engagement. Yeah. But that thing will sit on my timeline with no engagement, or maybe one. One of my friends, it might show up in their feed. But it's crazy. It's like clockwork. I can guarantee you, not even using last names, not even using any political references, just using the first name of each of the guys. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
There's a pretty famous picture of President Obama having a dinner party, and all the people around the table have been identified, and every single one of them is a head of media, one of the social media giants, Facebook, Google, CNN, C-SPAN, CNN, like all around the table. And some people think during one of his 2 terms, that's where they finally officially came together and was like, we need to promote these viewpoints, we need to crush these viewpoints. But it would also be wrong to place it all on Obama, because have you guys heard about Project Mockingbird? Oh, so this is from the 1950s. So in the 1950s, the CIA began to infiltrate different media companies in the United States. And understand, doing that in the 50s was a lot tougher because you didn't have these massive conglomerates. Like, Fred, what is it? Like 5 different media companies own like 90% of the media,
just about
or something?
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, I have a graphic on it somewhere. But so back then it was a lot more challenging. But the CIA basically said, our goal is national security. We can increase our ability to do that if the media is putting out specific stories that we promote. And if there are stories that make us more vulnerable, we don't want them out there. And so this was Project Mockingbird. This was in the 1950s, and officially it's never been repealed. And if you just want just a sample...
The Gulf War, they did that. There was many... During the second Gulf War, there was plenty of stories that Fox and CNN wanted to run, and the government, they was too sensitive, and it would somehow... it would be a roadblock to them defending the country, and they erred on not showing it. They even say they erred on not showing it. That's not free press.
No.
Well, so did anyone watch any of the Putin interview with Tucker Carlson?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't finish it. But the one thing I remember, and I can't even remember what the reference was to, but it was something about like something that's happened that like would have given him kind of like a victory over the U.S. like propaganda wise, and then he kind of like, and one way or the other, like I don't think he's a great person or anything like that, so this isn't like in favor of him in any way, but I will say like he kind of just was like, the United States owns all the media, like there is no winning a propaganda war against the United States, basically.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was kind of like, it was interesting because like, number one, I don't really think that like CNN is like the juggernaut that they used to be, for example, because that was one of the things that came up recently on one of, I don't know, it was like one of the Rogan, so the one with that Dr. Deborah shows that they were talking about how they tried to like bury him with all the COVID stuff, and he has a higher viewership than them. So like if you really think about it, like the traditional forms of media that used to have such a stronghold, really don't have the same reach that they used to.
Or are we being played?
But, well, the other thing is though, is that I think that it's just, maybe they're not being accessed in the same way. But they have the same base, but they're just being accessed differently. You know what I mean? Not from like traditional news sources.
What I mean by being played is like, so we, I know we've taken it way off subject here, but,
no, this is good.
But we have, like CNN they're dying. They're not going to go away because I don't think the government will let them go away.
Sure.
But MSNBC is hanging by a thread, and the only reason they can stay is they have the deep pockets of Microsoft. That's the only reason why they are in a non-revenue circumstance. They are just simply a ultra-left mouthpiece for that part of the country. That's what they are. But people say, Fox is the only news that really survives and makes money and they thrive. All that's true. They're hugely popular. I get it. But in the end, are we being played? Is like the illusion of diverse opinions and diverse sides and everything with these news services. In the end, is it really still the government force feeding the information that goes there?
I think there's a good chance that is true. You also are starting to hear Tucker Carlson use it the other day, the phrase permanent government. And so the idea is we are given the illusion of choice, Republican versus Democrat, and that is used to distract us. But in the end, the overall goals, whether you want to say that's the globalists, the bankers, the Rothschilds, the reptilians, the Vatican, whoever you want to say it is, those overall goals are still marching in that same direction. So yes, I would totally agree. One funny thing about just to tie it back up with Project Mockingbird, if you want to see, and you can find them on YouTube, it doesn't take a lot, how many news broadcasts repeat the same exact stories word for word, verbatim.
It's disgusting is what it is.
It is. And even simple things like, I watched this one that was very eye-opening. You know how the very final piece in like a local evening news is called like the throwaway piece? Like they'll have like one heartwarming story at the end. There was one just about, it was like in March, it was about like the Easter Bunny. And what people did, God bless them for taking the time to do it, they took local broadcasts from all across the United States and they put them together and they synced them up, and it was just word for word this silly story about the Easter Bunny. And
where does those marching orders come from?
Yeah, exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and this is a pretty common like viewpoint, I think, but if you go back to like Roman times with like the games and the Colosseum and all that kind of stuff, like it is advantageous for anyone that doesn't want someone looking to give you a lot of other things to look at.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's have you guys ever read Behold a Pale Horse?
I've not read. This is one of those books. This is one of those books in our book club that Jerry and I. Jerry's probably referenced a million times, and I don't think either of us have ever read.
So it was written by a man.
He may have read it. I haven't.
It was written by a man named William Cooper, who was in the government, in intelligence for many years.
And finally, Bill Cooper.
Yeah, Bill Cooper.
Oh, Billy.
Yeah. Fred, you have to know about him, right? Do you know about him?
To keep talking, because I know a lot, but again, I'm old and I don't remember names.
Well, so it's heavy, but it's one of the more eye-opening books you could read. But he actually talks some about professional sports, and he basically said, do you understand why these athletes are paid tens of millions of dollars a year? They are paid that much because they are valued that much because they provide a distraction to you.
Yeah,
They're
I believe
keeping
that
you away from what you should be seeing.
Wholeheartedly, I believe that.
And the interesting thing is how William Cooper died after he had written that book. Years after that, he was a very hot-button political issue, and some police had staked out his house, and he was supposedly accidentally killed in a firefight while he was trying to just get out of his house from a police blockade.
Naturally.
So, yeah, that's a wild one.
How many people?
Back to tunnels.
Okay.
And it would have been safer for him to go underground.
That was a good segue.
Yes, it would have.
By the way, Eric, when you're in post-production, you're going to hear this crackling sound throughout. I know that it's Fred crinkling his ginger candy.
Is that what it is?
I know, I'm hearing it too.
The best thing to do rather than edit it is just edit in like a fireplace right there. And it's just going to be... Because I was listening, I was like, what in the world is that? And I look, it's Fred. It's just like this over there the whole time.
Isn't that the answer to everything? Oh, it's Fred. It's just Fred.
I'm hiding it.
Tunnels.
Whew. Tunnels.
So check it out. We're coming back from the bathroom break. We're going to talk about domes. Deep underground military bases. Sucker. Dome.
So up to modern times, we've talked ancient underground bases, World War II era bases, and now up to modern times. So has everyone heard of the black budget?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yes. For those listeners at home who haven't, the black budget is part of the United States government's annual operating budget that Congress must approve, but they are not allowed to see what it actually goes for.
Who made that rule?
I don't know. That's fascinating. I don't know who made that rule.
Probably somebody within the black budget.
The man behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. This is definite man behind the curtain stuff. It is funded at least, and I made this presentation about 5 years ago, funded up to at least $1.25 trillion a year. So most years, and we've talked about
No wonder we're in debt.
I know, right? We've talked about secret space program on here in the past. Most years, the black budget is funded much higher than NASA. So a lot of people think, I personally think, that there's a good chance NASA now has been relegated to the role of public face of space exploration. Let's keep this going at a snail's pace. Behind the scenes, via the black budget, we're going to have much more advanced technology. We're already doing lots more.
They have Space Force.
Oh yes. Space if we haven't talked about that, we could. So some reports, some accounts say there are upwards of 130 deep underground military bases or DUMBs across the United States.
And again, that was 5 years ago, right?
Well, and this map you're about to see is from the 1970s, and the scope of these DUMBs is beyond anything that people can imagine. They're the size of entire cities. They're at least a mile underground, and they are cubic miles up to almost 5 miles underground in expanse. So this map has never actually been refuted, and it was leaked out showing maps of DUMBs honeycombing the United States. And the really wild part, this was 1978.
So those lines are supposed to be tunnels?
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are.
So main tunnel site, you've got some potential entrances and you have some future excavation. And so the main tunnel system you can see is concentrated in the Rocky Mountain area, and we're going to certainly talk about Area 51, but it now spans not only into the eastern United States but up into Canada as well. So Eric asked something really good, or mentioned something during the first half, basically said, if you actually tunneled this, it wouldn't be possible because you would have to get rid of all the dirt. And I made the Shawshank Redemption analogy because in the movie they're tunneling out of prison. And so, Fred, what was the secret way that they got rid of all the dirt they were tunneling out?
Put him in his pocket and he walked outside during
That's not real efficient, though.
Well, that was the thing, but he let it fall down his pant leg, but that's how they could do it. These guys do something different.
So how they're doing this is with nuclear-powered subterranes. So think about essentially a gigantic nuclear-powered worm that can tunnel through rock as easily as anything else could go through soil. And so these are actual pictures of them, and I've never seen the schematics released, but essentially the drill on the front is powered with a nuclear reactor, so it can get incredibly hot. So when it's going through solid rock, it's not grinding the rock, pulverizing it, and then trying to push it out the back. It is heating up so much, it is liquefying the rock. Now that has two massive advantages. Number one, you do not have to push any of the debris out. And we're going to see that when we talk about the Greenbrier. So number one, you don't have to bring things up to the surface as evidence that you're tunneling underground. But number two, and this is a really big advantage, number two, as this worm burrows through, it is essentially leaving a glass-lined tube as it goes. So the other massive advantage is you don't need to go in like a coal mine after the fact and either reinforce the ceiling or add columns or specifically leave certain parts of the rock untunneled to serve as natural columns. It just bores through and the support system is actually right there. I've read many accounts of people that have gone into these bases and they say the walls are very strange. They basically look like thick glass. So to give some idea, and this is from 1972. This is the RAND Corporation, which is a massive U.S. government defense subcontractor. So even then, they allegedly had speeds of up to 14,000 miles per hour underground. Now, initially, go ahead, Fred.
It's like Mach 2, right? That they can get to.
Oh, this is way over.
Yeah.
Mach 1 is 768 miles per hour. So let's just for fun, really quick. So the speed of sound is Mach 1. That's 768 miles per hour. Let's take the rumored speed, 14,000. That would be over Mach 18. Now, how this works is pretty interesting. It is essentially a vacuum tube system. Now imagine a train inside a sealed vacuum tube. You've got air in front of it, you've got air behind it. When people get onto the train, all of the air in the tube system in front of the train is entirely removed. So the train is accelerated through a vacuum where there is little to no resistance, which otherwise is really only possible in outer space. Any other place on Earth, you're dealing with friction and resistance. So these trains allegedly can reach these speeds because they're going through a vacuum tube and there is next to no resistance in them. So let's just assume for a minute that these rumors are actually real. 14,000 miles per hour could get you from Los Angeles to New York in 21 minutes. So once again, my own personal side conspiracy, and I've never seen this posted anywhere, I think from a national security standpoint, it makes a lot more sense to transport the President of the United States deep underground in one of these systems rather than up in the air on Air Force One. Plus, the President could get there a heck of a lot quicker. Now, just to show you this, to give you an idea of the scope, this is a nuclear-powered subterrane. You can see how large it is to the scale of the people there. And there have even been schematics that have been leaked over time of how these things actually work. So I've never actually seen it refuted. I've never seen, even in the comments section, somebody come out and say, hey, I work for the U.S. government. This doesn't actually even exist. So this seems to be the main way we're doing this underground.
So it was my understanding with these things, what they do is they are nuclear powered, and it's the engine for these things, because it's nuclear powered, it's just small. It's like, you got a 1 ton, you got a 2,000 pound box that runs these things. But what happens is it pulverizes the rock in front of it, and it heats it up so that the powder, like James said, makes a glass coating and it's perfectly smooth. When it just slides through there, and it's you don't have to reinforce it because it's a melted rock. It's thick glass.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild.
There have even been stories, this is kind of interesting, if you look at Pennsylvania history, there have even been stories from the pioneer days here of people being in rural areas of Pennsylvania and hearing what sounds like massive machinery down underground.
I was going to bring that up.
Don't go for it. Just finish the story. Go for it.
No, you do it.
I was at my limit, but basically I was going to say...
So that's all I know.
some of the historical legends are people started to go down into these things, and they said the walls were very strange. Now, I find those stories fascinating. Potentially they could be an urban legend, but I think to myself, if they're actually real... who was actually doing the tunneling during frontier times when this would have been well beyond the ability of human beings?
Reptilians. Nice. That's my guess. The thing is we've talked about George Washington back in the pioneer days and Valley Forge. Mm-hmm. There was alien or extraterrestrial or whatever, the green skinned people,
the green men.
They talk about this, that Washington took counsel with these guys at Valley Forge, so there's always been something going on. And you have these, and I was going to bring this up at a later time in the podcast as we got on, but you have these towns with the mysterious humming that they don't know where it comes from. That's all that shit going down underground, man, and it's there, and it's always been there. And whether we're making treaties or we're getting along with whoever lives under there, I mean, it's not just here in the States, it's everywhere. I mean, we talk about the things in Antarctica, we talk about the thing, they've got lava tubes in Greenland. We've got stuff off the coast of Monterey out there in California.
We're going to talk about that.
Oh, all right. See, I haven't looked at any of this stuff that James is bringing to the thing, but that's exactly. I mean, these are places that are hot spots for alleged underground bases, and they have them all over the world. They have them in China.
Activity.
Yeah, they have them in China. They have them all through the Middle East. They have them. These things are and they've existed all throughout the history of these places, and it's kind of like we're tagging along on these catacombs. I mean, we've got the Greenbrier, and they know it goes from DC to West Virginia, and maybe that back in the day, that was all those people everybody that worked there had no idea that there was a 1,000-foot whatever, square, however big it was, 10 football fields or whatever the hell it is, cavern underneath their hotel.
I must interject, if you all don't mind, I'm just going to advance one slide to the Greenbrier.
Oh,
Fred, you and I, we're just perfectly in sync.
So this is what the government actually admits is there.
This is
what's conspiracy.
Not only do they admit, this is now a tourist site. You can see this.
You can go in there and see it. Check it out.
So wait, they have a casino here too, right?
I think it's right there beside the Draper's Cafe Terrace.
So if anybody's watching or listening to this podcast, by the way, do you call this a video podcast? Because I hype this up and I tell people, but I'm like, yeah, it's sort of like a video podcast. Like, what terminology do you use? Because I want to be in sync with you.
I guess it's a video podcast.
It's these new kids, these newfangled terms.
Yeah, we do a video show. We have a podcast, but it's a video show.
It's on the TVs.
It's like Eric McKenna's OnlyFans.
That's the most boomer phrase ever. A video show.
They wanted to say
that video show down there.
It's a moving picture show.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a Nickelodeon. Put your nickel in.
Fuck y'all.
So this is the Greenbrier, and this is awesome because you can go there and see this now. Now I always wanted to do this, and I haven't had a chance to, but they denied. Well, they didn't deny it.
No, they did. They totally did.
Exactly. But once it came out, it's like, oh, yeah, it's there. No, we've got a better one somewhere else.
They're saying the tunnel. They're admitting to the tunnel too, to
Dude,
Washington DC.
It's a tour. Oh, I don't know about tunnel DC.
No,
so
they're not admitting that.
Let me explain what I know. Then Frank can add anything.
Okay.
So if anybody's watching this video podcast, motion picture short right now,
Nickelodeon,
and they're like,
it's a talkie
web show.
It's a talkie.
You're like, you know what? I'm kind of into this idea, but there's just no way. There's no way you could do this. Exhibit A, the Greenbrier Bunker underneath the Greenbrier Resort, West Virginia. So this was a continuity of government site. So it's very, very close to Washington, D.C. So the idea was, if the United States ever came under nuclear attack, the assumption was Washington, D.C. would be one of the first places targeted. The surviving members of Congress would be taken right here into the rural mountains of West Virginia to the Greenbrier. And underneath the ground, there were these facilities. Right away, they would essentially be stripped down naked and sent through showers to try to decontaminate them from any potential radioactive waste.
I swear I thought you were going to say, and then there would be strippers.
If he has anything to do about it,
I'm sorry.
Up next on the main stage.
That's fair. With this clientele, that's fair.
I was like, really?
So underground, and you can see it right there. They basically have an impromptu House of Representatives. They have government facilities. They have cafeterias. They have living facilities. This is essentially where the business of Washington, D.C. would continue while we rebuilt. So the really crazy part for people to consider, this was built under the ground after the Greenbrier was already a major resort hotel, and it was built there without anybody knowing it.
Nobody knew.
And as Fred alluded to earlier, it was eventually decommissioned because they had far greater facilities. So this is now a tourist site.
No,
And
where
Wait,
are
wasn't
those
this
facilities
also
at?
in a video game?
It could be.
Maybe.
So either way, I think I went there, but I didn't go to this underground thing. But I think I was at the casino. I was at some casino in West Virginia one time.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
a good starting point.
Yeah.
Good jumping off point.
Okay, but no, I do have a relevant question. Okay, how far underground is this? And
I don't know.
how did they handle the ventilation stuff? Like whenever, because they're doing this in like modern times, obviously.
Yes.
Like, is there like, do they like use the structure that's above it to like
more than likely
like run air ducts
I'm
through?
sure there'd have to be some kind. See, the thing was, is the Greenbrier was already there.
Yeah, that's what
And
I mean. Like,
they put this massive, like ungodly huge cavern with all this setup underneath it, and nobody knew. So I imagine that there's ventilation. I mean,
Yeah.
they probably used the existing, but they would have to
like do duct work up through it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, what they would probably do is just run it through that, but they'd have to put like anti-radiation.
Well, so
clean
here's my question
shit.
though: is like, okay, if the whole point of this is like for like nuclear, like holocaust, basically, if they use existing ductwork like in a building, and that building gets leveled by like a nuclear blast, like how effective is that going to be? Is it going to get like sealed off?
Oh, they put plastic and duct tape up on the windows, so you're safe.
Oh, good.
some charcoal in there.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, it's yeah. They hit under desks. They
Like
covered
they used,
something
like
under
the
desks.
drills they used to do
well,
just
absolutely,
under the desk.
Yeah, they hit underneath the desk.
Tuck and roll.
So
guess.
other known underground bases. So these are confirmed. These are not conspiracies. Then we'll get to the more conspiratorial ones. So this is right here in Pennsylvania. Have you all heard of Raven Rock or Site R?
It sounds familiar, but I
So
don't know.
this is pretty fascinating.
Freaking
So
birds.
This is down near the Mason-Dixon line, the Pennsylvania-Maryland border. So this is another continuity of government facility. They dubbed this the underground Pentagon. So it's up to 650 feet deep. So ballpark 10 feet equals 1 story. So at the beginning of this podcast, we talked about Darren Kuyu, Turkey. That would go 18 stories underground. Very impressive for 7th century BC. This would go about 65 stories underground, which is bigger than the tallest building in almost every mid-sized city that's out there. And so this would have been the underground facility for the Pentagon. It had centers for the Army, Navy, and Air Force. There are rumors that it connects to Camp David. And when President Obama was in office, he also visited this one. It is still active.
Wow.
Then we have a NORAD facility. This is Cheyenne Mountain
Cheyenne.
Nuclear Bunker. Now, this is wild. It is over 5 acres large underground, and it could withstand a 30 megaton nuclear blast. Now, very quickly before I turn it over to you guys, let me put that number in perspective. Thankfully, there's only been one time in human history nuclear weapons have actually been used in war. So that, of course, was Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and even that was terrible, what actually happened to the civilians there. But to put the number in perspective, those were 20 kiloton blasts, which would be the equivalent of 20,000 tons of TNT all detonating at once, which is still horrific and terrible. This facility can withstand 30 megatons. The prefix mega means million. It can withstand 30 million tons of dynamite detonating all at once. Now, the extra crazy part is, you would think that's insane, that must be the most high-tech thing ever. Cheyenne Mountain in Wyoming has essentially been decommissioned now because they have even better facilities than that. Isn't that nuts?
So wait, there's like they spent all this probably money and
They
time
love spending money, don't they?
building this, and like no one's down there. Like
Well, understand, it was an active site for decades, but now technology has increased. They have even better sites.
So they've made better, more secure.
Well, now they just keep the aliens down there now.
So can like the general public maybe use these ones if we need to?
No, you're not getting into that.
Well, that's kind of the premise of, have you guys everybody talked, I know we're all old enough, everybody talked about Armageddon with Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck.
Love that movie.
The better asteroid impact movie, did you guys see Deep Impact?
Mm-hmm.
So
It's been a while, though.
not only do we have the benefit of Morgan Freeman as president, which I think we all agree would be amazing,
Yeah.
but in that movie, they essentially take these facilities, and I think the facility shown where they're taking people into is basically supposed to be Cheyenne Mountain. It's basically used as that.
Cool.
So one of the terrifying aspects, Julia, of this is some people say the proliferation of all these underground bases is because the government knows whether it's Nibiru, whether it's extraterrestrials, whether it's a nuclear war, they know something is about to go down that is essentially going to make the surface uninhabitable for decades. And so they're building as many of these facilities as they can.
Just like that place we talked about first in Turkey.
It is interesting how history repeats itself.
Well, this sounds
Exactly.
a little bit more secure than the one in Turkey. I'm not gonna lie.
So, one more continuity of government site. This is Mount Weather in Berryville, Virginia, and you probably haven't heard of this one, but the entire mountain is hollowed out. It's one more continuity of government site. And Eric, earlier you're saying, well, why in the world are they keeping the president and the vice president together? Interesting bit of history here. During the 9/11 attacks, Dick Cheney, the vice president at the time, shady son of a gun. I think he knew about it, but that's for another time.
Tricky Dick.
is taken here while George Bush is kept separate, just in case something else
Did you
happens.
guys see that movie on him?
I love that movie.
Which
It
movie?
was so good.
Which movie?
It was
Cheney. It was
Dick, what?
was
Dick.
It was it called Dick?
Dick,
Oh,
yeah.
okay,
He
I
was
couldn't remember.
okay. You don't want to go hunting with him, but I mean, he's a good guy.
No, I just meant the
you know?
movie was really good. I don't know them. I mean, this was a presidency where I feel like I was not really smart and like old enough to like. I think it was like the first time I was able to vote. I want to say was when because
Oh my God.
yeah,
I voted in '84.
yeah.
87.
Or no.
I think mine might have been 87.
Was that the Reagan
wouldn't have-
Bush-
I wouldn't
was
have,
that the Reagan
I
Bush
wouldn't have
one?
voted when he was
Yeah.
in. I'm sorry.
I remember the
I actually would have been too young, so I did
Reagan
not. I did not vote in
Dukakis.
that one.
See, I've never heard of this place.
Really?
Yeah, I knew of a lot of them, but I've never heard of
A lot of them are right outside D.C. So the focus on dumbs is always out west, but there's a number here on the East Coast. A lot of people think they all link together. So
Wait, if they keep building these,
Yes.
is that going to like make the ground not so stable?
Oh, that's actually a really, really good question. The answer is no. They are. Some of these are rumored to be miles underground. It's
Okay.
far enough underground. It's not like a coal mine.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, where you have subsidence and then
Okay,
it falls
all right.
down.
Wouldn't it be
We're
hot?
down in
Wouldn't
an
it be hot
elevator.
as shit down there?
What's that?
Wouldn't it be hot as hell down there?
Oh, okay. That's an excellent question.
58 regular, is that what it is?
Yes.
58
So
degrees?
one thing we talk about in class, because I talk about Jupiter's moon, Europa. Europa has a liquid water ocean under the surface. There's a very good chance that ocean is teeming with life. And it's interesting, it's far out in the solar system, but it's so close to Jupiter. You know how we get water tides on Earth at the beach? Poor little Europa is so close to Jupiter. Jupiter stretches and Fred knows. Fred and I are in sync today. It squishes us, so it actually heats up with tidal forces. So NASA's pretty sure there's a liquid water ocean underneath. The problem is it's 10 miles underneath the icy crust. So then I share with students, how far have we ever gone underground on Earth? And the record goes back and forth between a coal mine in Russia and a diamond mine in South Africa. And so they both got down to around 4 miles down. That's it, 4 miles down. Now, this is an awesome story. Most Soviet thing ever. One time, the Soviet Union just decided, how deep can we drill?
Did we talk about this before?
Maybe.
Please say it again, because I'm like remembering it
and
as you
so
go.
they, most Russian thing ever, they wanted to see how far they could do it. It's called the Kola Super Deep Borehole. And it wasn't wide enough for people to fit down. It was only, I think, like 13 inches wide. They were trying to drill down through the continental crust. And so they only got down, I think, not even 5 miles, and it got so hot the drill bits were melting and they couldn't go any farther, so they stopped. Now, the side conspiracy we shared is they apparently mic'd the hole and they could hear moaning sounds.
Weren't they hearing hell or something? Okay,
yes. So a lot of the Soviets, the Russians, who are very, very Christian people overall, were afraid that they were actually drilling into hell itself.
Yeah,
and
I mean, that's a real fear.
But the point is a very good point. If we can't even go 5 miles underground without it getting so hot the drill bits are melting. Like, for example, in some of these deep mines that are only 3 miles underground, the temperature gets up to like 130, 140 degrees. How are we going deeper than that? So the argument is either we have such good facilities that they're constantly cooling it, or once you get so deep, you aren't going to get any hotter. You're going to hit cool spots. It's pretty interesting to me.
Well, so mathematically, do you know, like, to the very center of the Earth, mathematically, how many miles to the center?
Okay, great question. So the entire Earth is 12,756 kilometers wide. So one of the just completely insane
Canadian
parts.
What is that? What is that in like miles?
Well, let's figure it out on the fly real quick. Okay, me going with metric system. Well, you just told us during break your family's from Canada, so that's why I went with that. I thought you'd be more comfortable with those
family's
numbers.
from Canada, not me.
So the Earth is 7,972 miles wide.
It's wide. Cut that in half, then, right?
Yes. So here's the crazy part. Let's cut that in half, like Eric said, to get our radius, okay? Okay, so we have basically tunneled down 5 miles. So let's take 5, divide by 3,986. This is some fast math. Okay, let's move the decimal point 2 places over. We have only gone 0.1% down into the Earth. So we always talk about unexplored areas like outer space. We focus on outer space. You got to talk oceans, and you got to talk the Earth itself.
Like the crust and the mantle and the core?
Yeah, we've only ever
How do we even know that exists? Like that, and like now, here's the thing: is like this is one of the things. Like you just take as like. It's just you take it as like
facts because you're always told that it must
when
be
you're
true.
a kid. Yeah, like you get the crust, you get the mantle, you get the core.
Yep.
How do we know that? Like literally, like
So,
if we've never made it past the crust, like who knows?
How they get through the Van Allen belt?
Van Halen belt.
Let's just stay all night. Let's figure out all these things. So, Julie, the one way they officially know, and I know this from taking tons of college geology.
I thought you might be the person to ask.
Even though I teach astronomy, ironically, I only ever had one astronomy class in college. That's all they offered. All of it was geology.
I had one. I never finished it. I quit it. I was like,
So the way they actually know this is from earthquakes. When an earthquake goes off around the world, there are 2 different waves. There are P waves and there are S waves. So imagine a slinky. A P wave is a push-pull wave. You and a friend are holding one. Friend pretend we're holding one. Boom, 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 like this. That's the P wave. Yeah. The S wave, friend is up like this. So they measure the difference in the arrival times between 2, and they can tell where the boundaries are at. So that's the only way they know where the mantle is is.
So
and
it's
where
an
the core is.
educated guess.
But that's what I'm saying
Educated
is that
guess, yes.
like we're assuming that they just know like the
Yes.
the content. Like
Yes.
how did we come to the conclusion that like the middle of the earth is like hot, like a core? I mean, I get that we call it a core because like there's apple cores and like maybe that was the logic. It's like,
Right.
well, if there's a core of a fruit, then I guess
Right.
the planet has a core.
Right.
But like
What if there's seeds in there?
it could be. But like
That's a really good question because I know they know where the boundaries are.
yeah, I mean, I
They know
understand
the
they can like
ballpark size.
measure it, but like
Right.
how do they know it? Like we all probably saw the same thing in school where like they showed you like here's the crust, here's the mantle, here's the core, and like they like talk about it like it gets hotter as you go and like it's made of different like stuff.
Iron.
Like how do they know?
And nickel.
nickel.
For anybody listening, Julia has brought up a profound point. How
I'm
many
a profound
things?
thinker.
How many things are essentially established scientific facts? So much so they're repeated us so many times, they're ingrained so many times. We just accept them and we don't even think about it. And so, yeah, that's a very good point. Even if we eventually know that we are correct about the structure of the earth, how many other things are we told so many times? Like, crazy thing when
The age of the earth.
That's a big one.
So,
Yeah.
so
Oil's made out of dinosaurs.
So, funny thing on the age of the Earth, the oldest rocks they have on the Earth. So, officially, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. The oldest rocks that they have are only around 3 billion years old, and they find those at the cores of continents because in the middles of continents, you're not getting subduction zones where crust is pushing down and melting. So, how do you explain the 1.5 billion year difference? The main way they do that is by dating meteorites. Almost every meteorite that has ever fallen to the earth has about the same age, about 4.5 billion years old. So that's how they ballpark figure it out. But even beyond the age of the earth, how many things are we told again and again? So back when the United States and Soviet Union were getting really into mind control in the 50s and 60s, they found out an interesting fact. If you repeat something to a human being at least 20 times, it doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. If you repeat it 20 times, they will believe it no matter what.
Well, that explains a lot.
Yeah, it
People
does.
like me. I am fun. I am interesting. People
Jack-
like me.
Jack
I'm fun.
Handy.
I am interesting.
So think about our own media. Think how coordinated, we talked about this earlier, and how relentless the media is. How many times on point they have the same message over and over and over again. They figured out 70 years ago, if a human being hears something 20 times, they're going to believe it. So
I do that to my dog. You're a good dog. You're a
Right,
good dog.
see?
You're a good girl.
Hey, well, mine's confused. I keep asking him, who's a good boy? He's like,
I don't know. When are you going to finally tell me?
when can I meet this who?
Well, that goes back to, I feel like what you were saying, Eric, before is like, how long is it going to be before we just know what, we just all question what we know? And maybe we should be questioning it because I don't
Or a question that we don't know anything.
yeah.
I know it all.
Well, not everyone can be
Then
like
maybe
you.
then they'll give you the big desk then.
Well, I'm a profound thinker.
So the reason you called us here tonight, Eric, initially when you texted me,
Will
it
you
was
start opening all your episodes that way? The reason I brought you on here.
that'd be great.
Sorry, go ahead.
Is to talk Area 51. So there are, even despite all the lore of Area 51, there are allegations of underground tunnels at Area 51. So when the Bob Lazar interviews came out, probably back in 1989, Lazar, this is kind of interesting, it was a neat twist on his story. He didn't say he worked at Area 51 proper.
Right.
He said he worked at S4.
S4.
And what he said was, at S4, he said there were massive hangars that were essentially painted to perfectly match the topography of the land. And these massive hangar doors would open up that led to underground. So we've got Area 51. We also have the location in Ohio where not only were the Roswell debris
Yep.
unofficially taken to, but also this is where, I think it's called the Foreign Air Materials Command. It's basically if anything crashes on the Earth, whether it's a Soviet MiG, whether it's something from China, whether it's something from
balloon.
beyond, It's all taken to Wright Patterson and the legendary Hangar 18. And one more I'll mention before I turn it over to you guys is the Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah. So if you're interested in conspiracies, look this one up. Area 51 is still very, very active. About a decade ago, they built the biggest runway on Earth there. So we're not saying Area 51 isn't active, but some people believe since Area 51 was essentially outed, they wanted to go to a more secure location. So if you try to look up Dugway Proving Grounds on Utah, you just see nothing at all. But a lot of people think this is where Area 52 is actually at. And so if you look back at those maps that I showed you earlier, underground tunnels link all these locations.
It's wild.
Do you believe Lazar?
What's that?
Do you believe Lazar?
I 100% believe
I do
Lazar.
as well.
I find him highly credible. In fact, did you guys watch the more recent Netflix Bob Lazar documentary?
By Jeremy Corbell?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I'm watching that tonight.
And
that's fantastic.
And not only is it good, but what's fascinating to me is even today, during that documentary, Bob Lazar is giving these really, really excellent interviews to Jeremy Corbell. Bob Lazar still has his own lab where he's doing things. During the filming of that documentary, Lazar's lab gets raided right then. And so they're still keeping a close eye on him. Part of what I find so credible about Lazar is when he describes how this, well, let's start this way. Eric, do you want, for some of your listeners, maybe they've not heard of Bob Lazar, can you give like a Cliff's Notes version of the Bob Lazar story?
I kind of lived it from afar, actually, but I remember it came out in '89, and the way I understood it was there was a investigative journalist out in Las Vegas, George Knapp, and George Knapp was brought. He was looking for extra material for his weekly show or whatever, and he was brought some material from John Lear, which was the son of the famous Lear Corporation, Learjets. And John Lear had this crazy story about this guy, Bob Lazar, who worked to try to re-engineer spaceships at this place called Area 51. And I guess they said, okay, kind of crazy. They arranged an interview with Bob Lazar, and I think Bob might have backed out once or twice or whatever. And they ended up doing it with shadowing his face in a van. I think it was the first interview or something. And then they had a more formal interview before, and this Bob Lazar character, there were some holes in his story about his education and so forth, but he was so articulate and so specific on many, many parts of his story about the facility itself and everything else. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Bob was even able to arrange a tour by George Knapp to go see a portion of Area 51 as well, too, or S4. Is that correct?
Well, what really got Bob Lazar in trouble, and everything you said is perfect, he couldn't get them into the facility itself, but what Lazar started to do was take his friends to an overlook over Area 51 because Bob knew the nights that they were actually reverse engineering and testing out this technology.
Right. Yeah, and many times George Knapp himself and many other people have tried to dig into Bob's story, but they keep coming back that the key points of that story and that even the late 80s technology of like handprints to open doors and all that stuff was absolutely 100% straight on. Lazar says that his educational records have been wiped by the government, and of course that's
which they can do.
A lot of they can, and there's no way that my argument is this: on the peripheral, looking at it, there's no way I don't believe. Even Jerry couldn't do this as much as he loves to read. I don't think anybody could become self-taught to that level of brilliance in that particular field. He would have had to have gone. He would have to have the formal education, I believe, to obtain the knowledge which makes him as brilliant as he is. You know what I mean? I can see how potentially it was wiped out.
Well, isn't there something, I don't know where I heard this, but basically a lot of the different people that they've put in positions like that, they intentionally have chosen people that they could discredit. Like either people that had, like if they had, because then did he have a girlfriend, or did he was
Not
there?
only did he also ran a brothel.
He got busted for that. Well, that's what I mean.
His
is that
wife was cheating on him during this whole thing.
Yeah, like there was basically there was some, I don't remember where I heard this, but just basically if you go back and look at a lot of different types of stories like this, and obviously Bob Lazar is like the most well-known one, but there have been people like throughout history that like have been privy to certain things, but have also kind of like had something, you know, to hide, whatever. You know what I mean? But exactly, that's just it. Though, like I feel like you could make a case to discredit almost anybody if you really wanted to. You know what I mean?
Some more salacious than others, but you know.
Sure, but it's just I feel like if you dig deep enough, like you're gonna find something.
Well, and if you really want to go dark, and we don't have to go this dark, but a modern conspiracy, when you talk about the media and athletes and politicians, the only way you get in on the in is by intentionally doing something to give them leverage.
Yeah.
And usually it's something lewd and terrible. It's videotaped, and it's basically, okay, I was willing to put myself out here. I was willing to do this to get in.
Now you're in the club.
You're in the club, and now you know that if you ever try to get out of the club, that's going to be used against you.
Well, and wasn't that kind of something that was thought was like part of the whole Epstein thing anyway?
Oh,
that, like,
absolutely.
you know what I mean? That there was like people that maybe some of the people that visited the island weren't all like, you know, participating to the level that others were, or something.
Or that resort that the rich go to. What's the name of the resort in upstate New York that the rich, or is it California, where they go for the little retreat?
Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
Bohemian Grove. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's more than a retreat. That's like a...
Well, a lot of people
they refer to it as that, but I feel like it is like...
Well, it's a big club.
Yeah, but
yes.
but there's like legit like rituals going on.
Oh,
there.
absolutely.
That's and
as George Carlin said, you ain't in it.
Well, and then wasn't it what was the president? Was it Reagan or Nixon? One of them said it was like the, I don't know. I don't want to use the word that he used supposedly, but it was just like he said it was very flamboyant. Maybe would
so
be
hedonistic supposed to be right.
I can't remember which one it was.
Everything gets checked at the door there, and then that whatever happens there is an alternate reality from when they leave. That's how I was explained it. Who knows?
But yeah, that was
so
the
when
one.
I went, when I was hanging out there,
But that was the thing that like everyone initially was kind of impressed with Alex Jones on, is because he's the only person, like the only outsider that ever actually got in there.
Yeah, you can still see the video.
There's been some young kids that have recently done.
Yeah.
One guy I think was even mentioned on Rogan recently, and he's got like he went there twice by himself and filmed it.
Was it that video footage when the owl was abandoned and he went underneath it? Because I saw that. Yeah, that was impressive.
It's just
It's wild.
I guess in a free society we have to permit that. Like we have to permit people to gather and be exclusionary, right? Although we try not to let that happen anymore. But you know, it's almost like it really that particular level of freedom really could lead to some really bad stuff.
Absolutely. And if any of you listening are interested, there's a great movie that's essentially about Bohemian Grove. They don't call it that, but have any of you guys seen the movie The Conspiracy?
No.
Oh, you should see it. It's fantastic. Netflix tonight. It's really, really good. It's essentially about Bohemian Grove. Absolutely it is. So one of the things, just to wrap up Lazar, what really fascinates me is the name has been around so long that I think one of the dangers is people lose sense of the fact that he made these revelations in 1989. So just to add a little bit more to what Eric said, Lazar basically said he was there to reverse engineer crashed extraterrestrial UFOs. And to Lazar's credit, Eric's exactly right. They wiped all of his educational records, but he was still able to provide to George Knapp not only his ID from S4, but also all of his pay stubs
as well.
A phone
book, I think, an element of a phone book where the internal
that's
extensions all matched.
And so what Lazar said at the time that sounded ridiculous, but it ended up being true. He basically said, when we took these things apart, he said the engines of them were surprisingly simple. And he drew diagrams. You can see diagrams online. He said they're basically operated with a perfectly cut triangular wedge of what he called element 115.
Oh, yeah.
Which he said had anti-gravity properties. Now, the fascinating thing is, at the time he makes these revelations, the periodic table, when he goes up to like uranium, it stops in the 90s. Everybody's like, nah, this guy's totally crazy. But since then, all of these have been synthesized in labs.
Right.
Yep.
And as Eric said, this is 115. It's unpentium, which has these natural anti-gravity properties. And finally, Lazar, they always asked him, like, did you see aliens there? And he said, do you guys know the story with the alien?
Yeah.
So he said one time he's being led through this hallway. And he says he's got MPs on either side of him. And he's told to keep his eyes straight ahead. As he's walking out of his periphery, he looks into a window. And he said he sees two human scientists in lab coats beside what looks like a short, big-headed being that you would definitely associate with a gray alien today. And so Lazar said he's not sure if they intentionally wanted him to see that as a test or to try to confuse him, or whether he actually saw evidence of an extraterrestrial working there. So his story has remained very, very consistent over the past 30 years. Lots of people have tried to discredit him. I don't think it's ever worked.
I think if anyone's really interested in this, you've got to take 2.5 hours out of your life and watch the interview with Rogan and Bob Lazar and Jeremy Corbell in the room together. And you just need to listen to Rogan's questioning and just see the answer. And at that time of that particular interview, Lazar was not well, and he was suffering from bad migraines. You can see he was struggling, probably the nerves. I mean, you're on the biggest podcast in the world, and you're talking about something that some people could argue might get you killed. But because I always had a little bit of doubt in me, but I was so excited to watch that podcast, and when I saw it, I was just like, wow. I said,
he appears very sincere.
Well,
he never monetized any.
No,
that's what I mean. Like, he's not like wealthy or anything, from what I understand.
And Eric mentions the getting killed part, and I've listened to different presenters on UFOs, and here's a really fascinating part. Think about it like a mountain. They say the most dangerous part is when you're starting to go up the mountain where you're not totally known nationwide yet, but what you're saying is true, and you're starting to uncover things. That right there is the most dangerous part. Some people could say Lazar's not legit because he hasn't been killed yet, but essentially Lazar is over the peak now, where he's gotten so over, to use a professional wrestling term, that if something happened to him now, that would just add more people to the cause. And so he's essentially safe now because he's gotten it out, he's survived it. But I've always found him very sincere. Watching that Corbell interview, part of the reason that Corbell interview is special is so few people can actually get Lazar. Like, he's so over it, he's so done talking about it, that he doesn't even really want to do it anymore. So this man is not doing it for fame, not doing it for money. I think he's sincere.
I do too, and the fact that the story has remained consistent all these years, he hasn't changed one iota of his story, not one scintilla, right? I mean... And
decades ahead of when a lot of elements of that story were even proven at the time.
Yeah, there's the other thing too I always worry about is... in the end, are we just being played? Like, is Lazar another actor in this whole thing for us to keep looking over for decades? Let's keep looking at this UFO thing and get the public to be somewhat curious and little bits and Egyptian drags, because there is some really bad shit going on. Yeah. Maybe even in alien world, I don't know, but something. I always, like I said, as each year goes by, I keep questioning reality.
See, that comes up a lot in MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, because what we do know, the CIA has absolutely infiltrated civilian networks. Have you guys heard of NICAP?
Is that a movie? No, but there was a movie about
got some NyQuil.
No, yeah.
Need a nightcap.
So there
was a movie about that where there was a guy. There was a guy who infiltrated. I wish I knew the name. I can see the picture. The movie's probably 8 or 9 or 10 years old now. Yeah, and you can find it on Netflix. But he was basically a useful idiot, and the government was using him for disinformation campaigns. And he was one of the UFO MUFON celebrities. I can't remember the guy's name. Now it'll come back to me. Okay. They made this whole documentary about him. That he was simply being used. And he admitted it.
See, what we do know, this has happened in the past. Back in the 50s and maybe in the early 60s, There's a very, very well-respected group called NICAP, National Investigative Committee on Aerial Phenomenon. This is before the topic of UFOs was taboo around scientists. So you got some very qualified people in it. Well, what had come out in years after that, the CIA had their own assets work their way into NICAP, into leadership positions in upper levels of NICAP. They started to pay themselves exorbitant salaries, and they bankrupted all of NICAP. Wow. So since then, MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, of which I'm a part, has come about. So to your point, anytime somebody is prominent, there's always the counterculture, the counter argument of they're only popular because they're a government asset. And I've even heard that about people like Stanton Friedman, who is overall considered very credible. So I just think, Eric, at some point, you have to pick at least a couple people to trust. You have to pick some place to build your foundation. For me personally, there are a lot of shady people in this world, but Bob Lazar, Stanton Friedman, those are the guys I'm building my foundation on. Those guys are legit.
Yeah.
Fred Kowalo, you can include him too.
Sir Fred.
and I think that's the overall, when I talk about questioning reality in society now, that's my overall concern, is the basic bedrock foundations that all of us need, whether it's societal foundations, it's family foundations, it's whatever. If that keeps getting eroded and we lose those foundations, we more than likely as humans will not be able to handle that. The chaos that comes, the decisional chaos that will happen in our lives will not be pretty.
And I just read this today, and it makes so much sense. If humans are in a constant state of fear, they are more susceptible to outside suggestion. And so the idea you had mentioned, like there is no foundation, it's chaos. That is probably intentional. The idea is to intentionally remove whatever foundation there is, keep people in a constant state of chaos, so they are more prone to suggestion. Like, just not to talk politics, but look back on COVID now in hindsight over that couple-year period. When people look back now, some of the things that people were willing to do without questioning it at all, people they were willing to turn against. Now in hindsight, not only does that look crazy, but now more and more details are coming out. Like just the other day, even the WHO admitted, yeah, there were some pretty serious side effects from this. But at the time, people were so hyped up about it and in such a state of fear, they were willing to take any suggestion the media gave them. So part of what was the most sad to me about COVID is, if you look at it, the same exact suggestions that got the German people to turn against the Jewish people and to turn against anybody who wasn't just full-fledged German, that same tendency was exploited again 70 years later, and the same exact thing happened. So one of the most disheartening things to me was, we haven't learned anything since World War II. That same tendency is still there. The media knows, intelligence agencies know how to actually exploit it, and they did it all over again. It was so sad.
And people look at it, I think, if it's not like hateful, like how they see it as like being like what they associate with, like,
well, they associate it with national pride.
Well, that exactly,
you're
like
you're doing your country a favor by doing this,
and now
this is what you're supposed to do, and that's how they disguise it. Again, 70 years ago they did the same thing, and you could turn a whole country against a race and eliminate them, and that's kind of what. It's the same rhetoric.
Yeah.
So to go political for a second, that is why I find that it's extremely dangerous, in my opinion, for our current president to talk or demonize an entire section of the voting public. I mean, when he uses the term MAGA, or whatever term he wants to use for what he considers these MAGA people, that's actually what he says, and it's pretty derogatory when you're basically taking a big chunk of the American populace and demonizing them. That's not, I mean, forget the political implications. It's just not good for civil order to do those kinds of things. You know, it's
absolutely.
and you can, and again, And again, I don't think it's also helpful on the other side when they talk about, well, if the things remain the same and that person gets back in there again, our society, our democracy is doomed. Both sides are saying democracy is doomed if the other guy gets in there. It's just, I don't think we are sophisticated enough to discern those words and put them appropriately where they belong. We elevate the importance of those words in our society now, and it comes almost to the point of panic.
Well, there was like something I was reading recently that was talking about how important language actually really is, and how like we've lost sight of just the way we utilize words, because it's like such a common phrase to say.
So true.
Say I'm overwhelmed, and if you actually look up like what overwhelmed means, it's like it's a far more extreme thing than what most people actually like utilize it for. Like, yeah, like, okay, I'm having a rough day. I have too many things to do on my to-do list, and like I'm probably not gonna get them all done. And there's actually not any serious consequences if I don't do them all, but like I'm overwhelmed because of it. And it's like, well, overwhelmed is actually like a really intense feeling, you know what I mean? And if you consistently utilize words in a way that like
the meanings of these words have changed,
it's like it's diluting the English language in a way. Which we've
that happened a long time
ago.
Yeah,
exactly. But at the same time, I mean, it's like diluting like the meaning of words, and it's just
which affects communication.
That's what I mean, and I think it affects like our perceptions of the world around of our inner world. You know what I mean? Because it's like if you consistently like view yourself as being out of control and in kind of like a state of chaos or a state of fear, then you are more susceptible to so many things. You're more susceptible to illness, you know what I mean? Just like all kinds of stuff. And so I think there is like something to be said for just, really considering how language is used and how you hear it, you know what I mean? And just like really examining what feelings come up when you hear someone say something, you know what I mean? And like not just letting yourself go on those feelings.
Well, wouldn't you say that the most demonized word and overused word and words that was used inappropriately in our society is the word fight? If you think about what the word fight meant 50 years ago in society, a fight was like a war or a boxing match, or two people on the street actually had a fist fight, right? Now, every politician and every speech there, we're going to fight for this, we're going to fight for this, we're going to fight these people so they don't kill your democracy, we're going to fight these MAGA people, we're going to fight this, we're going to fight the woke. It's like, it's nuts that we have really taken a word that has a specific meaning and impact in society, and we've now just, but everything's an extreme now. Everything is just over the top, more and more and more, and it's, when I was young, my grandmother was a very educated woman, but she's a rural Canadian, so very calm, very stoic demeanor. And she had these little phrases that she would say that I have always remembered that just do not apply in today's society anymore. Like when she would talk about, two people in the family had a disagreement, they had a slight quarrel. Things were just a slight quarrel, or if something would annoy her, she'd go, I'm just slightly put off by that. Like that was, everything had like a temperature. Yes, exactly. Everything had an appropriate temperature for what the actual reality was. That kind of thinking and communication, I think we have just lost that today.
Yes, and they have learned from the best. I'm sure you've all heard of Operation Paperclip, where after World War II, the United States brought as many scientists over as they could. And so people know about this. That's Werner von Braun, the other German Nazi rocket scientist they brought over, and they basically began NASA here. Less people know that some German test pilots were also brought over. Sometimes they actually flew some of the experimental German craft directly over here if they had the range. Now, where I'm going with this, hardly anybody knows that part of Operation Paperclip, the United States also smuggled in as many German ministers of propaganda as they could, because as horrific as the Nazi propaganda was, and as terrible as it was that they turned an entire country against specific groups of people, the United States government was absolutely fascinated by it. The Nazis were so fascinated.
The process was valuable to our government.
Yes, that they could control an entire country that way. And so they brought all those people over they could. And so when you look at our media today, it is still 70 years later an extension of those same exact tactics that were uncovered during World War II.
Yeah, I am not an educated person in regard. I have not gone to college and everything, but I do understand the importance of language because it's always been fascinating to me. And I do believe that, yes, I was a person that used slang growing up. We all do. But in reality, we have really decimated the King's English. We've decimated our chosen language, and I don't believe it anymore has the same effect societally as it once did. And I think that is a little dangerous. I really believe that. I mean, what are kids... there should be levels. Temperature is a great way to put it. Temperature is a perfect way to put it. Kids should understand there's levels of intensity of things, right?
Well, and nothing, sorry, Julie, nothing can be levels because everything in the media is designed to be polarizing. There's not levels of gray in the media. There's just this side, that side. It's black or white. It's good or bad. And we're basically ingrained with this dichotomy. But if we look at reality, we know everything is gray. Everything is different levels. Everything is different temperatures.
It's a better life to live that way.
Well, and what I was going to say is basically just that.
Hit the piss, Fred.
Totally distracted me. Just like the 1984 kind of like whole like I think that was 1984 with the language double plus on good.
Yeah.
Was that right? Was that 1984? But just like that was basically like what they did to the language is they just chopped it up and they were like, okay, like we're just gonna like only give you so many adjectives to use and you get a couple of descriptors and this is how you create levels. And beyond that, like there was, I don't know, like I feel like it did really it completely changed the way people communicated with each other.
You're right.
And I think that something like that is what we are seeing now. And it's interesting because like I do feel like slang is an important part of like youth culture, and the further away from your youth you get, and I can say this too as no one in this room is I don't think under 40, that like you do lose a little bit of like touch with what that time in your life was and why it's important to have like almost like a language that just belongs to you. And so I do think that there's value in that. And like, it's interesting though, because like, you
mean like it's part of your identity?
Kind of. Well, just that I feel like it's part of development. You know what I mean? It's part of like the developmental process of kind of like feeling like you have something that's just your own that like, that's like relative to your peers. You know what I mean? Like that kind of sets you like, that it's like it's identity, but it also sets you apart from the people that are older than you because you can't help but believe that, I don't know, I remember having the belief that like somehow the experience I was having was unique and that like, not that I was the first person to ever have it, but just that like the people above me didn't really understand because there is some kind of like
that's part of the teenage experience. Teenage coming of age experience was you don't want to do what your immediate parents want to do, and and they did the same thing to their parents, and but I get it. I just think though the last 20 years, so we just elevate everything to an urgent extreme all the time, like,
and that's kind of what I'm wondering about like youth culture today is it's like, is there a distinction?
That's why there's so much gun violence. They can't discern, no, this does not deserve this. Maybe you should punch that guy in the face, but you shouldn't shoot him. Well, and that's the thing is like being like if you're triggered by something, like I get that like it's such a, I feel like it's become such a controversial term because then it's like it separates the idea that there are like levels of emotion. It's like, okay, something might make you feel a certain way, something else might make you feel a more intense kind of way. These things might not be relative to one another, and like you can't just create one word that's all encompassing, that if someone does this to your emotions that like there is this automatic like response. Like all of my emotions aren't everyone else's responsibility. We don't understand discernment. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, you're right. And I feel discernment. Like, we can't discern anymore. And we're living in a society where like capacity of our lives, we just don't. I just feel like that's becoming less and less like distinguishable and valued, and like I don't know, like it's an interesting time to be alive. For sure. It is. Communication is definitely difficult. Yeah. And so that's why we want to come on and talk about things like tunnels and stuff. Yeah,
Well,
we're everywhere here. That's what we do.
You know, what we could do, it's your call, it's your show.
Come back and revisit Area 51?
Well, see, the funny thing is, like, I was nervous coming in this. I was like, oh, this presentation is a slide.
You never have to worry about that.
After all this, we are only at slide 21 of 43, and I haven't even gotten to any of my 4 video clips.
No,
so
we're gonna need a part 2 on this.
We could do deep underground military bases. Part 2.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Dongs.
Well, and truthfully,
I thought you were saying dongs for a while.
Dong. It's my bad Pittsburgh accent. Hey, we're going to talk about dongs today. Deep underground bunkers.
For everyone listening, this was actually like the quickest turnaround we've ever done with our scheduling. Like, it was literally like, I think Eric reached out like a week and a half ago, and we had a date a little further out chosen.
Yeah, and I thought I read it wrong. I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do it the 23rd. Not March 23rd, February 23rd. I'm out of town March 23rd.
Yeah, one of us, I won't say who, is going to be in South America for 3 weeks, so the rest of us had to work around that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we're always me. Because it is always you.
You're always out of town and out of country.
Yeah, but
after that, I mean, we could come back and do that. You know, for the most, I think I leave April 20th, 4/20. But so, you know, I mean, we could.
We've got time.
We could do dongs part.
Part of the reason I would love a part 2 is the next big one we have coming up. We've talked about this. We need to do music conspiracies.
Yeah, I've been waiting for that one.
And it's so big and so much, it's going to take me probably a month or 2 to make that one. Yeah. So if we can stall for time and do this first, I'm all about that.
We've totally got some time on that.
I can't wait to do that one.
Mr. Jimmy Page.
I know. I really kind of want to get Jerry to come for that one if we could set up another mic.
Throw another mic up here if we could do 5.
Oh, we'd have so much fun.
We could do it.
Eric, I rarely hype up any of my things, but may I hype up?
Sure.
On Saturday, March 9th, there's a brand new conference in Eastern Pennsylvania from my friend Eric McKenna.
Yeah.
Eric's a great story. He's a jazz musician by day, paranormal researcher by night.
I know that's a life.
Sooner or later, he's going to be on the History Channel or Discovery Channel. He's that good.
That's right.
And so there is a paranormal conference on Saturday, March 9th. I'm leading it off, but then there are some History Channel heavyweights like Nick Pope and Bill Burns who are coming after that. So that one's going to be pretty good.
That is heavyweight. Bill Burns is there.
Bill Burns is there. It is in Philadelphia. It is... I could look it up. I just have on my phone potential Eric McKenna Philly conference. No, this one's in Philadelphia. The one in Pittsburgh I am also speaking at. That is MUFON, Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh. And that is on Saturday, April 6th. John Ventry is running that one.
Right on.
Now
that might be like a field trip for all of us.
I'm coming to that one.
You should, because...
Can you get me on the list?
I can get you on the list.
Do you know a guy? Can you get me?
I know a guy.
I want a VIP. I want parking. I want VIP. I want stage access. I want to take photos.
Fred has to have a list. You can, he's a walking celebrity. We can't just have
I am not a celebrity.
We cannot just have him show up.
The really funny thing, I was a little embarrassed by this. At the end of the evening, they always do speaker panels like Q&A. Mm-hmm. So last year, I got Travis Walton on one side of me. I got Nick Pope, former UK Minister of Defense, always on the History Channel, on the other side of me. And they open it up for questions. And the first 3 questions in a row are directed at me. And I'm like... I'm happy that people are into my presentation, but I'm embarrassed. I'm like, oh my gosh, Travis Walton's here, Nick Pope is here, and they're asking me. They're asking this unknown science teacher these questions. So finally, John Ventry comes in. He's like, okay, let's have some questions for the older people here.
Oh
and
my
so
gosh.
then they turn. And then the funny thing is, Travis he's seen me enough to know me, but not know who I am. So they would do around the speakers. They would ask one question, everybody would answer, and so then I would go first, and then it would come to Travis. He'd be like, "I agree with that guy there." So to Travis, I'm that guy,
That's
but
awesome.
I'll totally
so
take
funny.
that. Yeah.
Just a real quick question: Do you believe his story?
Travis?
Uh-huh.
Yes. So funny thing about Travis is number one, probably one of the more credible
Fire in the
alien
Sky.
abduction
Fire in the Sky is the
in
movie.
history.
I saw it in '93.
terrifying.
I couldn't sleep for days.
That was my big date movie in high school. I thought I was smooth. Because, have you guys seen Fire in the Sky?
Oh my God, you've not seen that movie?
Oh, you got to
watch that tonight. That's
Go-
required.
I told you I have a hard out because I'm going to sleep.
No, you're not.
You're not tonight.
No, not tonight. You're going to watch that movie.
If I watch that movie, I won't go
You're
to
going to watch
sleep.
that movie. You'll give us a 1,000-word report tomorrow.
So that was my big date movie because it would be terrifying. The girls would be scared. I'd like put my arm around them, like, I'll keep you safe.
Good move.
But so the
Any port
funny
in the
thing,
storm, buddy.
if you actually watch the movie, it's very different than Travis's real story. And like Travis is one of the few alien abductees that actually made money off his story. In later years, he said he regretted selling it to Hollywood because they like went so many directions with it. But story is very credible. The funny thing is, he finally tried to like break away from that story. So one time I saw him, because I've seen him 3-4 times at a conference where he tried to just give a lecture just about like UFOs in general, and he didn't talk about his account. So finally, towards the end, he's like, "Are there any questions?" People raise their hand like, "Can you tell us what happened to you?" He's like, "Do you really want to hear that story?" Everybody's like, "Yes, tell us," because it's basically like a band coming on. It's like, you know what? We're just going to play our new stuff. Just like none of the hits, you know. But so his story has been very, very consistent. And one thing he shared the last time that I found very, very impressive, he said, because 5 of his co-workers witnessed, we can't say the abduction, but basically saw the UFO, saw it shoot a beam of light at his chest, knock him into the underbrush. They turned around, went to find him, couldn't find him. But he said almost all of those co-workers were offered upwards of $10,000 to say, it wasn't true, we made it all up, we faked the lie detector test. And to their credit, every single one of those men turned down the money, said, nope, we don't want it, this is what actually happened. So I consider him very, very credible.
It's one of the last movies that James Garner was in. James Garner, he played,
I will write myself a note. Fire in the Sky.
Fire in the Sky.
Yeah,
Okay,
he played I think he played the mayor of the town, James Garner, from the Rockford Files.
You'll actually dig it.
And Big Valley, right?
Like James said, it's sensationalized. Hollywood sensationalized it.
When was it made?
93.
93, yeah.
Okay.
And I think it takes place in the early 70s or something.
Cool.
75, 76.
Mid-70s for
late 70s, like 79, but yeah, close.
He was a logger, right? He was in Oregon.
He was with a team of lumberjacks outside of Snowflake, Arizona. So they were actually way behind on their logging contract. So initially, because the guys ran right to the police in town, like tell them, initially the police thought they were lying and they thought they had murdered Travis to try to cover up the fact they were way behind on their logging contract. But they all told the same story. It checked out. Then 3 days later, Travis shows up totally naked, 3 days worth of stubble on his face at a payphone outside of the town, called his mom collect, said, "Hey, I'm here, come get me."
Wow.
Yeah, that's
you'll dig it.
Okay.
Yeah, the abduction scene, then him awakening in that cocoon, and then being examined on that table was just unbelievable.
Well, and that never happened in the real story. That's the crazy part. And in a way, I just wish Hollywood had done the real story because it's even more fascinating. You're the one who has to go. Do you want me to talk about it just real quick?
Go. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
The movie is freaking terrifying.
It is.
Not only is it, in my opinion, the most realistic portrayal of gray aliens ever. Like, part of the reason I think gray aliens are real is because Hollywood goes out of their way to avoid showing them. They'll show all
They're all blurry.
Yes,
out
or
of
they'll
focus.
show like comical
Out of focus,
yeah, where in reality it's terrifying. So the movie shows real gray aliens, but they show all kinds of crazy stuff happening. Like, he gets thrown under a plastic sheet that paralyzes him. They cut a hole over his eye, then a needle comes down into his eye.
They wrap him with this. They tie him down and they wrap him with this sheet across his face, like.
Yes, and
he can't breathe. He's like, and they punch through that hole. That's fucked up, man.
A needle goes into his eye. At one point, he is in microgravity. He's floating, and he floats into this other cocoon where there's like a dismembered body. None of that happened in real life. Now, in real life, to me, the real story is more fascinating. Number one, Travis Walton is one of the only alien abductees, credible ones I know of, Never had any missing time. He remembers the entire thing. Number 2, he's the only story I know of where he's in a ship that's inside a bigger ship. Now, and I only know this from hearing his presentations. He only shared this at one of the presentations. So he awakens in a room, and it looks like a police interrogation room, and it's lit, but he can't tell where the lights are from. And alien abductees always say that. It's fascinating to me.
The walls are illuminated, but they don't know there's
how.
no light source yet.
Right. So his clothes are still on at that point, and he said 3 what looked like gray aliens come in orange flight suits, clearly not human. Walton looks quick and picks up what looks like a pipe and holds it above his head in a threatening fashion. The aliens all run out of the room. Then, almost like Han Solo in Star Wars Episode 4, when he's charging through the Death Star after the whole legion of stormtroopers, Walton goes running after them. Now, this is the part you can't find online, but he told us that I have pictures of it. He said he was suddenly in a circular curving hallway, and so he starts to run down the hallway, and there's doors to the right. He goes in one of the doors, and he says suddenly he's on the bridge of a ship. Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. This is very parallel to Bob Lazar. He said he walks up to this control panel, and it's a dome ceiling. And he said there's imprints on it. There's not buttons or levers. So he puts his hands over it. And as soon as he does, the entire dome ceiling turns into a star field, like my planetarium. So he said as he moves his hand, the star field starts to move on the sky, and he starts to get nauseous. So he pulls his hands away. As soon as he does, the whole dome goes black. So he goes back into the curved hallway, and this time he goes out a doorway on the other side. Now, this is unique in abduction lore. I've never seen anybody else say it. He said he walked down a ramp, and he realized he was on a smaller circular ship, and there were a couple of these ships lined up in a row. And he looks, and he's in the hangar of a much bigger ship. So then, third fascinating part, he walks into a room on the other side of this massive hangar. He said it's a laboratory, and there's human scientists working inside. And he tries to grab their clothes and beg and plead, hey, please help me. He said all the scientists ignored him. It's like they couldn't even hear him. So then he said a very muscular, human-looking man with long blonde hair, almost like a Nordic, walks in, and in plain English said, hey, what are you doing? You aren't supposed to be awake. Grabs Walton in a bear hug. Walton blacks out, and then when he awakens, he's at this phone booth outside town totally naked, and then he calls his mom.
Wow.
So to me, that's the fascinating part. Why didn't Hollywood
tell the real story?
Just tell the real story? It's so much better. So part of me, when I see what they did tell, and I don't know if this is the case, I almost wonder whether elements of military intelligence were even involved then, or you know what? Let's take a story. Let's not stop the movie, but let's make it so ridiculous that nobody actually believes it.
Yeah, that
kind of
makes sense.
When Spielberg told his story in Close Encounters, that somebody came in and gave their narrative of it.
Well, NASA supposedly sent him a 20-page letter saying,
what?
You're not going to put this movie on. And the really crazy part about Close Encounters
I've still never seen that movie.
Well, you know what? I think I did a
long
time ago.
There's one for you, Eric, and there's one for you again.
So even the actual cast was never given the whole script at one time. They were just
that
given
I did know.
Fred, did you know the ending of that movie where the humans are exchanged with the gray extraterrestrials is supposed to be what? You know this. You got me the graphic novel.
I got you the book.
Come on, baby. Come on. You got this.
Oh, I know it. I just can't think of the name.
It's the legendary Serpo exchange.
Yep, Serpo.
Where the United States allegedly, during Kennedy's reign, had an exchange with the Eben civilization and sent 12 military astronauts there, and they brought somebody
we talked
back
about that
here.
before.
Yeah, Serpo.
Oh boy. Okay.
But I mean, we're gonna have to think about underground bases.
Yeah.
We are.
For the next one.
Dongs.
Dongs.
Some of those guys those UFO celebrities are making some serious coin too.
I know James is. James.
You missed your calling, Brad.
I
think we all did, really. I mean, we've got some charisma going on in this room. We should have just started this a long time ago.
So we got multiple shows in the works here. All right, we're gonna put Fred to bed. All right, friends. Until next time.
Thank you,
James, as always. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, friends.
Oh wait.
What's that word? What's that word when people eat on camera? What's that called?
Oh shit.
What's that called? Like people eat on camera and like that's a new thing. Like, what is that called? They chew and all that.
It's like all the sounds. It's supposed to like relax you. There's a word
Listen
for
to
it.
people
You need to
eat
know
is
about this. I know
disgusting.
you know about it.
Did you know? When I ate my pretzel, I pulled away
Cass
from
would know about it.
I pulled away from the mic.
We're out.
All right. Okay.
We'll never get
It's
out of
gonna
here.
come to me in like 5 minutes. All right.
Later.
Just